and then anybody who does come late can catch up if we've said anything crucial. Yeah, okay, sorry, Jasmina, I interrupted you. So
no, it's absolutely fine. Maybe I wonder whether it's better to go from the beginning and then we'll update on the bits, but just to say that there is new section 6.2 has two parts now, and I'll explain why then there. 6.4 and 6.5 has two parts, and we'll explain again why there. But those have been sort of drafted per se. So
that's
maybe
great.
we should just go from the beginning and we talk as we come to them.
Okay, so I don't think that anything, I mean, we had a draft sort of introduction that we talked about, 6.0, we talked about probably 2 weeks ago, I think, certainly a week ago. And then, yes, a week ago, I suppose. And then we've got 6.1, which is just really a few bullet points. And again, I don't think any of us have done anything more to that. So that's probably an action on Dennis and me and Peter and Jan P to have a go at knocking 6.1 into some sort of shape. And then we come to 6.2, which is the first of the prediction ones, and which is now sort of, we've got two versions there in the Dropbox.
Yes.
So do you want to tell us which one we should be looking at, Jasmine, or should we be looking at both?
Well, I just wanted to ask Ben Swallow, first of all, if he had a chance to look at the one with today's date. Are you unmuted?
Thank you. Yeah, I had a quick look at it, but I haven't made any changes since this morning.
Okay, so I'll just explain then. So basically 6.2 with the 19th of November date is the one that we drafted before the meeting last week. And then at the meeting last week, we said that maybe we need to join some of these parts together and put them into a more cohesive 2 or 3 bulletin points, rather than we had a sort of bulletin points and sub bulletin points. So the one that is 27th of November, I have attempted to do that. And so I would suggest we maybe look at that.
Yeah. So if we can, everybody, it's the easiest thing if we all look at it separately.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. So
because also it's a lot of text, so I'm worried that we kind of you have to read it at your own time and make comments on it.
It's also easier if one can scroll up and down independently. The number of times I've tried to scroll up and down on a shared screen.
Yes, me too.
Thinking about.
Yes, me too. I always touch it when there is, and I think, oh, okay, I can't do anything. Okay, so I mean, maybe one conversation to be had today is the way that 6.2, 6.5 and 6.2.4 and 0.5 we've sort of structured are around a brief summary and then points that we address within that from that summary, and a short conclusion for that section. And the thinking behind this is that when we then lift this and we put it into a flowing paper that has these parts, then you can see, as you're reading all of it, then you can lift parts from it and kind of puzzle, like put them up or down and things like that, if that makes sense to people.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the format here. Yeah, so I don't know if there is much more to say than just it would be useful for people who haven't been involved in doing this to comment on it and see whether it makes sense as its own point about predictions and decision making.
Thank you. So we've got sorry, I'm scrolling up now. So there's three main parts. and one of them is subdivided. Is that right?
Yes, and we can join. I think we will join it, but it was subdivided because one was talking about within host and host, and maybe some of this part might be useful to be linked to the endemic part, the one that Jess is leading.
Right. Yes.
And then the other part is about spatial, temporal, and tracking of individuals and societal data. And I don't know whether this can potentially be linked to the data part.
Yeah.
And it talks about the complexity and the need to kind of reassess what we do with complex data and things like that.
No, but I guess that we all maybe have to read this, and maybe for private use, I would almost take the pieces and glue them all together into a paper to see if they can start fitting together.
That's a very good point, Jean-Pierre, not just for private use. I was actually going to suggest that maybe we, at the end of today, somebody takes the responsibility to put it all together as a flowing long paper, and then we, if it's feasible for next week or the week after, we all read that and comment on, for the moment, whether we have everything we want in.
Yes, and then we can still publish changes to sections, which are maybe shorter to read and look through the whole paper again to see where the changes are. But at least start having one paper.
Yeah,
somewhere.
I agree. I don't know. Do the others agree?
Well, we could call it the paper 27th November so that we have a kind of common point.
Yes.
And then we can go on publishing section modifications.
Yeah. Yes, of course. And then we add them as we plan to. But I think we are, I mean, I have a feeling that we are getting there. It would be really useful to have Glenn, because I had a lot of conversation with, so Glenn, Ben Swallow, myself, Lisa, we had chats, and then with Peter, we had chats on the, is it 6.4 or 6.5? I lose track. But we sort of feel that it's coming together, but we need to kind of read it all together.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're at the stage where we need to put it into one document and view it as a whole. But I think there's probably a lot of things that have been said multiple times, certainly in the kind of introduction sections.
And and that sort of, so in a way, I don't know if there's much to discuss, rather than to ask you to just read through 6.2,
yes, sure.
6.4, and I'll explain a little bit about that. And then 6.5 has two versions, and I think Lisa is the best to explain exactly why you, because you did the 27. Lisa, maybe it's best for you.
Yeah, I think so the difference is just I started going through and sort of changing the wording and kind of making it flow a bit better. So I might take that one down, because I think it's easier to look at the 25th of November one, because it doesn't have like a million small edits. So Jasmine, if it's okay with you, I might take that one down for now.
But Lisa, I'm equally happy if you would like to change the wording and upload that version. I think that's even better, because you will improve it, right?
But we can also, when we do the cleaning, just accept changes that have been recommended, and then we can always to clean it up a little bit.
I think that sounds good. I mean, I don't think on the quick look that I'm having right at this minute, doesn't look as if Lisa has changed orders or content. She has just worked, as far as I can see, on improving the flow and the language and so on and so forth. So we're unlikely to massively disagree. And at some point we're going to have to, once we've got the whole thing together, read it as a whole and do a bit of polishing. So I think the easiest thing would be to take that version and paste it with the latest versions of the others that we were talking about. What I'm not quite sure about is the best way, and certainly I need to read it all, and probably others well, sounds as if most of you have been working on them, so maybe you don't, but I need to read them, and maybe others. I'm not quite sure of the best way to carry on after that, because I suspect, I know what I'm like when I read things, I start tweaking the words, and I don't think we're quite at the point where tweaking the words is the most useful thing to be doing. And because it just, you know, if we track lots of little changes, it makes it hard to read for everybody else, doesn't it? So what is the best way to, when we first read it, maybe just think about substantial changes in terms of points that are duplicated or missing or need to be moved, but not worry too much about the detailed writing, and then do that at a second stage. I don't know what you think, really.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah, and I agree. And also just to note that, like, the language definitely really does need improving, because I mean, most of the things were drafted, some of them were drafted whilst we were having a conversation.
Sure.
And then I sent the draft, then people added to it. So it's a work in progress. So the language and stuff really definitely will need to be tightened at some point.
Yeah, but I think we should try not to get, I should try not to get too distracted by that, and really think about the main content and try and get that right. To say the polishing can be done later. The important thing really is to make sure that we've got the points we want to make in the order we want to make them, and so on. And then we'll need to decide how we want to do the detailed bits and pieces, so that we're not all trying to work on the same document at once, because I find that gets really confusing too.
No, but let's stick with working on our sections in the view of what we see in the total paper.
Yes.
So that we still propose changes to our sections in a way, but now looking at the whole thing and guessing what has been put in. Of course, there might be problems that in two different sections, each one decides to take away something that was mentioned in the other section, so it goes missing, etc. There might still be coordination problems. But...
Well, as long as, if we make substantial changes like that, as long as we keep the earlier version, at least for a bit, you know, and put dates on things, so that we know we can go back if everybody's removed the same bit.
No, that will make the Dropbox quite big, but
yes, it will.
But that's okay. The Dropbox is our historical memory up to now,
and we can. I mean, Dennis, of course, is away for a few days, so he's not here today. But he does do quite a lot of tidying up the Dropbox, mainly by moving things into the archive. But that's fine. It makes it easier to see what we've got, and we know that the archived stuff is there if we need it. I don't know at what point the archive gets cleaned, but we'll worry about that later.
I mean, I think one thing to say, so when we were working on the R paper, I think what worked really well is that people were putting changes, but then one person, and it was you, Valerie, that kind of took the responsibility and really tightened the paper up, went through it, you know, and really put it together at the very end. And I think maybe we need to think who might be wanting to do that. I mean, it's early yet, right?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I don't mind doing that again, or helping somebody else to do
I wasn't going to say that. I was just going towards it in a convergent way.
You know, it's something I can do, and I'm happy to have a go at it. But I don't think we're at that stage yet.
No.
But it will need doing at some point. But we all need to do a bit of, well, quite a lot of tightening things up first. But I think if each, as Jampi said, if the group doing each section continued to do a bit of work on that, and say certainly, I think those of us involved in 6.0 and 6.1 have got more work to do. If we can individually get each section that we're fairly happy with, and we're all fairly happy with the structure of the whole, then at the last minute we can go through and do a bit more sort of unifying to make sure it all works properly.
We didn't talk about 6.3. Ben, maybe you want to say something, because I read through it and I think I put a paragraph in there, or did I not do it in there? But you and Glenn, yeah, Ben, please tell us.
Yeah, so the way it was left, I haven't done a great deal on it this week, but there's quite a lot of content there that overlaps with some of the estimation paper discussions. Unfortunately, I couldn't make the estimation talk on Wednesday evening, so I don't know how much was discussed there, but it's really making a decision at this stage on how much of this could just be copied across into that paper and how much we can keep here.
Yes, that's sort of difficult, isn't it? Because we don't want to spend a lot of time, honing it here if it's not going to fit in with the other sections here.
Yeah.
We had, I'm just trying to think, oh, Ian was with us, but he's disappeared. So who was at the estimation thing? I'm trying to think
I was there.
What we talked about.
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember. There was a document that Danny wrote with a bulletin point, right?
That's right. So we were.
So if we find it if we can, everybody has access. It's the one with, in the estimation, there is one with the capital D, then little d, then A at the end, I believe.
Yeah, I think that's right. So it's dated the 25th. So it was done on Wednesday.
And there is an overlap. I mean, from what we talked there is an overlap with what we talked with Ben and Glenn, and what is in that file page with that section. But there is also an overlap in the section that Ben wrote to data. And I have a feeling that paper is quite stagnating. Maybe it's just my feeling, or maybe I'm not.
We've been trying to get together a group to really take that forward, but it hasn't really happened yet. So hopefully next week there will be some data discussions. But
yeah, Glenn and I and Ben talked briefly that we would be very happy to be involved. I'm speaking in your name, Ben, so shout if you disagree now.
No, I'm happy to be involved with that, definitely.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what we... yeah, I mean, I don't know whether it's happened yet, but a day or so back, we were talking of Kira was going to send a doodle poll to the people that are involved in the data on Slack, which is not very many people on that Slack channel, but also to, I think Ben is on that, if I remember rightly already, but Glenn and Jasmina are not. So we thought Slack people plus Glenn and Jasmina, Nigel Shadbolt, and also perhaps Frank Kelly and Peter Diggle, who are both involved in Delve and might have something, to contribute from that perspective. So that was what we were talking of doing, but I'm not sure whether anything has happened yet. I'm not aware that it does, but hopefully it will happen very soon and get that group together. I mean, what I'm not sure is some of these things where there's an overlap, whether we want to, although they sort of, there's an interface, whether there are slightly different points to be made in each section. So we want to have it in each section, but with a reference to the other, or whether we really don't want to say very much in one section. And it depends. I can imagine there'll be some points where you think, yes, these sort of overlap, but what we want to say from the data perspective is rather different from what we want to say from the modeling perspective or the estimation perspective.
Yes, I think that's a good point. And I think, yes, and if we build this in subset ways, then it will go in the modeling will say the list about, say, data, for example, list about data and precisely why what's the use of data in a modeling concept. Then you build it into the estimation where you have the challenges of having or not having data.
Yeah.
And then you go to the data, which discusses, picks on these points, but there is additional parts. That's right. That's what you mean, Valeria.
I think so. I think we try and put it where the major part of the challenge is, with fairly brief mentions elsewhere, but just saying what the perspective is. But exactly how that'll work, I'm not sure. And certainly when we're drafting it, it's a bit hard to do that. I think all we can do is with each point is to sort of write the paragraph as if it would fit here in whichever section we're talking about, and then you know, as you've been saying, we may need to move things later, but I think we have to draft it and make the points we want to make, or identify the points we want to make. But perhaps that's another reason why it's not worth trying to polish anything too much at the moment, because it may be all moving and the you know, the emphasis may change.
I think that you're very correct in saying that data and models will be mentioned both by data and models, but with slightly different meanings, in the sense that modelers might think that data are needed either for calibration, for prediction or forecast or whatever, and also as inspiration. As new data exists or comes in, I might consider having new components in a model, or phrase it differently, because certain data become available. While data people will see that models are necessary for interpreting data and, in a statistical sense, maybe correcting data or doing things, and that are also models that do it. So you see the same connection, but in different ways, and you can probably phrase it that way.
Yeah, I think so. And also, of course, for models, models can be used to suggest the data that are needed to be collected as well. So
yes.
So
yes, I can imagine data that do not exist. If I had them, then I would.
Exactly. And, you know, if you want to tease out these particular sorts of effects, then we need the models to build that in, but we also need certain data to be collected. And perhaps also to suggest which data are most useful. I mean, that's another big area, isn't it? You know, if you've got finite resources in terms of data collection, where do you put them to get most benefit?
Yes.
Yeah, most of those sorts of things are discussed in this particular section, but I'm just wondering, we were sort of wondering whether they're more likely to go into the estimation or data papers, but I agree that perhaps we can at least mention them here and make links to the other chapters, and then always if we find that there's too much content for here, then it can just be copied across to the other papers anyway.
So maybe the main task for all three sections, and as Jasmina says, unfortunately data is rather behind, but if there's an overlap of people, hopefully it will catch up a bit, is to get all these points made, and then to decide at what level of detail, you know, they need to be included, or whether it's brief or whether they need to be expanded. But perhaps it's not just seeing this paper as a whole, but seeing the other two as reasonably complete things as well before one can really do that.
And perhaps I can go through it and try and organise it. I think the way that Jasmine has organised 6.2 is quite helpful with the bullet points and the clear progression with sub-bullet points as well. So I might go through it and try and.
Yeah, well, I think that's the way one wants to go, if we can, is to try and really, you know, that the idea of the challenges is to have a list, basically. So it's a set of bullet points, and rather than having too much linking material between them all. So a bit tighter than a normal paper in terms of the amount of material you put in, but maybe it won't work, or maybe it's not appropriate this time.
I was going to say, Ben, while you're doing that, maybe you can just copy and paste information that you think doesn't fit here in the context of the model into, call it a draft of a data paper and just put them there. And
Yeah.
then potentially, I think what we had really useful to start with here is framing of what we wanted to do. And then we had something to work with. I think if we can produce even the worst ever draft of a data paper that can frame, and people find faults in it, but then we put stuff in because we can see that it's missing. I think it needs that to start the data paper going. Do you agree?
Yes, I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
I think it's always that getting started, isn't it? I mean, once you've got something, then you start to be able to build on it and add points. But that first step is hard.
And so when we have our first data meeting, we can say, well, we've been working on the modeling. This is the leftover aspects we think are important here. Why don't we start? What shall we add, or do you disagree, and so on?
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good.
What all of these sections are still missing is, and I think we that's maybe should be an action point for everyone, is having thought about what is missing, what the challenges are, maybe a sentence or two as a conclusion for each section about how we could potentially address these challenges. And then they can either go here, those, or they can be expanded in what may be a paper conclusion or discussion section.
Yeah, that sounds good. What I was just thinking was, given that there are only 6 of us here, and I can't think how many are registered on the Slack channel, is what I'll do after this meeting is just to sort of put a very 2-line summary on the Slack channel of what we've decided to do, so that hopefully the other people will also look at the documents and contribute to the updating. I mean, there will also, since I actually remember to record it, there will be a recording, but I'm not sure how long it takes to get up on the YouTube channel. So that might take a day or two, but they should be able to listen to our discussion and also look at the various points and contribute. So hopefully that will happen. So, sorry, go on.
No, so I was going to say, so it sounds like we were very effective. We could be almost done.
Oh, I don't know about that.
For this meeting, I meant.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes. So what have you just posted, Jumpy?
No, it's the address to something I happen to listen to. There are too many meetings around. This was the Alan Turing Institute.
Yes, I listened to some of that.
And one of the Cambridge colleague was a certain Neil Lawrence, who apparently directs an initiative on using data. And there's something called the DELV study group in the Royal Society, who have now written a report called Data Readiness, where they discuss how to use all the data that is around for this emergency. And I thought about that for speaking about data, because they are very much interested in not the focused collection of data that one says one needs, but what they call happenstance data, which is data that exists and how to use it in the best way. In the sense mobility data or big data registries or whatever. And it was quite interesting. I mean, this, but as I said, there are too many meetings around now where people talk about, and too many groups that have studied by now COVID. So it spends half of the day almost listening to webinars of various kinds. Another thing that I also got in the email, I can just mention it, is that we were talking sometimes ago about where to publish this in the end. And I don't know if you have all received, for instance, an invitation by the Royal Society Philosophical Transactions B, that they would like maybe some proposing as guest editors. It's not a bad place. I mean, to be in philosophical transactions is nice, but
sure. We've been, I also got that, and I'm sure lots of others did too. We've already been, for some while, we've been trying to contact the right people in the Royal Society, especially because this whole program partly sort of was initiated by the RAMP thing. So there's a Royal Society connection. So that publishing there is one of the possible places.
Yes, I
We
guess
have
that
been
several
trying to
people have
follow that up.
have seen that letter or that
Yeah.
invitation.
The other obvious place is the Epidemics Journal, because they published the last thing, and that they, when we started talking about this, they did contact us, sort of suggesting that might be an option. So we're trying to follow both those two up, but have got a bit bogged down with the Royal Society in lack of response from them. I think they're just really, really busy. So I think it's one hand sending out things saying, why don't you edit a special issue for us? And the other hand who's trying to cope with all the COVID stuff. So the real question, I suppose, is which we're trying to find out, is whether they want more epidemics and COVID related stuff. Because the things that came to us were just special issues could be in anything really. So I don't know, but yes, I agree, and we are trying on that one.
And
I've managed to download that.
Is it in a
thing
bad format?
Where is the link that you posted, John P?
No, I see what the problem is.
Okay. Is that the same? That's the same thing.
No, it's a Macintosh oriented thing. Let me
Just
Oh yes, I know. Yes, I know this data stuff. Yeah.
so the Windows machine need the same format of web. This is the address.
Yeah.
One is easier to use.
Yeah, that's great. Yes.
I'm sorry, I posted the web location file on the Mac instead.
That's fine. That's good. What I was just going to say was that when I was talking about getting this data group together, I mentioned Frank Kelly and Peter Diggle, because they're on this Delve group. But maybe it sounds as if maybe we should include Neil Lawrence and see if we can get him along as well. Do you think, from what he was the speaker you were talking about?
Yeah. No, I think it's a good idea, because I was listening to those things as well.
Yes, I heard some of them, but I didn't catch that one. So
no, it was the last one, if I remember.
I think it overlapped with BIOS, and I think I moved across to BIOS to listen to their talks, the later part of that. So I didn't.
Oh, Glenn is here.
Hi.
Good.
Glenn.
Apologies for being
almost
late.
Finished.
Right.
I'm joking.
Yeah, sorry, I've missed everything.
That's fine. Well, we have recorded it, but I think probably the easiest thing is just to catch you up very quickly with where we've got to. Jasmina, why don't you just take Glenn quickly through or Ben, one of you,
Okay.
where we've got to.
So we kind of started talking about point by point, and then the plan is now that we have done some further work on the 6.2. So we discussed the two versions. I wonder whether you had a chance to read it from this morning. I presume not.
I haven't, sorry.
No, that's fine. And so I explained the existence of the two versions, and then we discussed the existence of the two versions of 6.5, which I also presume you hadn't looked, but that's fine. And the changes there are word changes. So the plan going forward is that each group will continue working within their subset of sections, but at the same time we are going to formulate now a sort of modular paper which includes all of these parts together, so that we can read it all together and see whether there is overlap or whether we have missed some things. We are still focusing over the next week on components and messages and key concepts within, and then afterwards we will think about sort of refining and fine-tuning. So that was a section by section chat, and then we've just been discussing 6.3 and the data and the linkage to the data paper. And I said again, I disagree, shout if you disagree, that you are happy to be involved in the data paper because we discussed that already. So yeah. Valerie will add you and I onto the data data Slack channel, and Ben will think about what we have currently as a 6.3 to be tightened into 6.3 in the format of 6.4 and 6.5, and what is left over then put into a draft version of a potential data paper as a discussion point with that data group. Does that include everything we talked about?
Yep, sounds great. I think I agree with all that.
But somebody shout if I missed something. We started talking about the Turing Institute, but we are there still. Anything else I missed?
No, the only thing missing is if one of us will do the gluing together to get his first approximation of a paper, or if each one does it as he wishes right now, in order to be able to better concentrate on his own sections. And we wait a little bit until we make the glued together paper. We take one round of editing our sections first, but considering all other sections as an instruction before gluing it together.
So suggesting that we don't put the modular paper for next week, but we sort of do it our own, like you said, privately.
Okay, yes.
Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes. I think that each one can glue together the pieces that one is most interested in or whatever, look at them and then think about his own section, at least for one round. And then we can make the first, after having made these modifications, we make the first version of the paper together. So we take 1 week to review our own sections in the view of all other sections that are now around, because we essentially have everything for the paper in theory, except for references and stuff like that. So we try to see it that way, looking at it privately together, and then doing corrections to our own.
Privately together, okay, Jumpy.
There was a comma between the two things.
Okay.
It sounds a little bit like a concept that all our governments ought to include in their guidelines.
Oh, but Italians are very good at that. There was a long period in Italian politics where various parties were talking about parallel convergences. That's a good concept.
Yeah, I like that.
The other thing that I wanted to ask you at this meeting is that I like illustrations and figures and things like that in papers. I wonder whether sort of a kind of a Venn diagram of some type might be a good way to present the linkages of what modeling is and how it fits, or whether that's a little bit too toy for this paper.
You're thinking of this paper. I mean, that almost might be something that one would do when you've got several of the papers together. I think, well, I suppose it's both, isn't it? Linkages within and linkages across the range of challenges, because there'll be a lot.
Yeah.
So, but maybe it's just worth, if diagrams sort of come to mind that people think would be helpful, just making a note of the possibilities. I suspect it's not worth putting a lot of time at the moment into trying to hone diagrams. But you know, if there's something very obvious that would really add to the paper, then we should remember it.
So in some ways, it would be quite nice to have some diagrams just to sort of liven up the, because you know we're not going to have figures like traditional figures, I guess.
Sure.
Not as text might be quite good.
Yeah, that's how I was thinking. So that, you know, if somebody looks at it and they see a lot of text, sometimes they look for a figure and to sort of capture it.
Well, a bit if we can use the odd figure to capture the structure a bit, and give a sort of overview of how everything fits together, that might be good.
But that's something to think later, I think, once we have the paper. I just wanted to get the feeling of people.
Yeah.
Yes, it will take some fantasy to do something serious that kind of represents modeling. I already thought of a photograph of, say, a Gucci event, and then under it, this is not the only kind of modeling or something like that. That's not really serious.
It is very, very Italian approach, no?
Very Italian, especially to think about Gucci. I could have thought about somebody else.
Oh,
But yes, I think we can, let's put the paper together first, more or less. And then we can see what
I
can
actually
be
quite like that
illustrated.
thought, Jan-P. I'm thinking about it more now.
yeah.
I'm just thinking copyright, but you know,
Oh,
Oh yeah, okay. We want to Gucci, yes.
can we afford Gucci? I don't know.
Yes, that's it.
They might want to be in a scientific paper. You never know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, okay. So I think that's where we were. So I'm sorry.
I think that's fine. So Glenn, do you think you've caught up?
I think so. Yeah, and I'll have a
Reasonable.
read of the. I'll have a read of what's been.
I think we all need to read, because obviously you've all been working on these documents, you know, right up till the last minute, and so we need to capture those. I think, I don't know whether Peter or Jan-P has read them, but I know I haven't.
No,
So
no,
we
I
need.
also have a big backlag because of all these other webinars and
I
meetings.
know.
They
It's
have
very
different
easy to
intensities, different weeks.
spend your whole day from, you know, getting up to going to bed doing nothing but webinars, and getting backache in the pocket.
Yeah.
So I think we all need to read. Certainly those of us responsible for 6.1 need to do some work. So maybe we need to set up a little time when we could do that, perhaps, you know, early next week, so that we've got a better section for you to read before or by next Friday, assuming that we meet again next Friday. I don't have strong feelings about whether one person does the pasting and then we all read the pasted, or whether we separately do our own pasting. It's not going to make much difference, because I think we will need to work on each section a bit more.
I think we should definitely meet next Friday if people can do it, because I think one of the reasons that it's moved fast is because we were task driven in a way with a weak target.
I mean, we are trying to get the same time, groups meeting at the same time each week, so if it's a regular slot in the diary, it makes it much easier for everybody. And I think we're getting to the point where we have regular times going forward. But certainly this group started it rather earlier, and I think we've benefited from that. So that's good. So same time next Friday, all being well. I will, as I said, I think I was just saying when Glenn arrived, I will put a tiny bit in the Slack channel, just sort of alerting the others who aren't here this morning to where we've got to and what we're doing before next week and so on. I don't think, and I'll suggest to Kira that she adds Neil Lawrence to the group that she's trying to get together on data, and hopefully something on
I
that.
think Chris Dent, who joined this week, might also be interested.
Okay, yeah.
I've added Jasmina and Glenn to the group on the Slack channel as well, so you should be in that.
Great, thanks, Ben.
I should add, I haven't asked Chris, but he seemed interested in data, so I would expect.
That's Chris.
Yes, remind me where he I have seen him this week, but I can't think where for a minute.
I'm not sure where he's on, but I know that he's just joined IDP because Chiara messaged me about it.
Yeah, okay. I know I've seen the name, but I can't.
Edinburgh, I think.
I think he's
Okay.
Edinburgh, yeah. If it's
Yeah.
There is a Kristen at Edinburgh anyway.
Okay, so good. All right, so we'll excuse me, we'll go forward with all that. Shall I stop recording? Does anybody want to continue, or shall we start reading?
Okay, now let's
I'm going
meet
to go and
next
start
Friday
reading.
with a lot of news. So that, but you're right. We almost have now all the sections for the paper, so we can at least see somewhere in the future a complete paper. That's a good thing.
I mean, I've set in my head, and I don't know if this is too presumptive, by Christmas to have this paper ready, or at least ready in a format that the other groups can see what we've done here.
Yeah, I think that might be feasible. I don't think we'd have got a polished paper by then, but
No.
but then until we interact with the other groups and move things around, we're not in a position to sort of consolidate that anyway.
No,
hopefully
exactly.
we should have something that is visible by other groups.
Yeah, and I think then
makes
it will be this sort of geared momentum when my one paper is ready. Oh well, let's see how that is structured, what is happening, we can maybe do this, what we need to do in this one, and it's a sort of geared initiative. That was how I was thinking.
Yeah, sounds good.
The other thing I wanted to say is, a long time ago I wrote a chapter around modeling for policy decision making, and that's going to come in a book. It doesn't have an overlap with this stuff, but it has some of the ideas that I have around modeling, and is written with people at the Institute for Disease Modeling. So that's going to come out in February, and I don't think it will distract from any of this, but just to be aware. I don't have a proof yet, but I'm going to get the proof by the end of the year, was the plan.
Okay, thank you.
What's the book called?
A data science, and it's volume 44, and it's written, there's a few chapters. One chapter is on modeling. I can send the link. And it's edited by Arnie Rao in America.
Thanks.
But just to flag it up so that we know that that I did that a while back.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, it may be that, I mean, one of the things that we'll want for these papers is to get a good list of references. And I think that of itself is going to be quite a challenge, because we don't want each challenge paper to have, vast numbers of references. I think we want to make sure that each reference is really the best reference on a particular topic, so that it's fairly tight. But that in a way is quite hard. In many ways, it's easier to just fling everything that's even remotely related. I mean, there are two styles to references, aren't there? One is that anything that you've found that even remotely touches on the same area gets cited just to cover yourself. And the other is really to only cite things where they are, they have something useful to contribute. And I think we should go for the latter, but we will need to think quite carefully about, especially for modelling, about what are the key modelling papers that or books, chapters, whatever, that set the issues that we want to use, not so much for the challenges, I think, but to set the scene so that we don't have to cover stuff. They've got all the background material, so we can say, this is covered in such and such.
So for example, in that chapter, I go on in details about the development of mathematical epidemiology, and like what we say at the beginning here is a very concise that could be done. But there is also work by Matt Keeling and I don't remember, it was Ed Hill or Leon Denon, who also did sort of the backbone of epidemiological modeling historically. So things like that.
I think there are a lot of papers and books that do cover that material. Some are more up to date than others, of course. So it'd be a question of trying to see which ones cover, I suppose, cover the most.
And some of them,
sense.
and some of them exclude Hudson, who is the only. I mean, I am only bothered because she's the only woman who was involved in that historical version of modeling.
I missed what you said, Jasmine. It excluded whom?
Excluded Hilda Hudson, who was the only woman.
Okay. Yeah.
So I was just mentioning.
But we also have to remember, I mean, it's good to have a motto that we are not so much concerned about the past of modeling, but about the future, right? And there things are different.
Yes, exactly.
Women involved, we don't have to speak that much about Reed and Frost and what they did.
No, I don't think we need to speak at all about them. I think we just need something, a reference, which says, you know, the history of up to where we've got to is encapsulated in these 2 or 3 references, and then move on from that.
I think it's a good rule of thumb, if you want to have relevant references, that you only put references in which you have actually read in full.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Yeah. No Googling and adding it in, which I think happens quite a bit. Okay, that's great.
Actually, sorry, just before, so like I would just to pick up on what Jan P was saying, I think that what I would quite like is references that link to the sorts of techniques that we think can help solve the challenges. I think that's for me, if I was reading this, that's what I'd really want. So we lay out the challenges and then you say, go and look at this because it's a step towards answering that. You know?
I think that's absolutely right. And I think that while we're in our individual little groups trying to improve or even write our sections a bit, that's something that we should really think about. You know, which references would be key ones that we want to cite. So that's good.
I think that's a good action point for us for next week as well.
Yeah. I noticed Peter says he's going to disappear, I think.
And that was some time ago.
Sorry,
I was just away for a couple of minutes.
Okay, I only just spotted it. Oh, that's all right then, because all I was going to say was, can you and I and Jan P sort out a time when we might meet to discuss 6.1
section?
But it doesn't need to be done with everybody. I just didn't want you to disappear.
Okay.
The opportunity.
Well, I'm going, everybody. Nice to speak to you.
And you, Jasmine.
Apologies for being late.
No, it's bye.
It's great that you managed to make it. So, you know, and you've done a lot of the work. So.
But next Friday, same time for the general meeting.
Yes.
And can we just summarize what we're aiming to do for next Friday?
I think perhaps you've already done this, but some of us need to read all the sections.
I also need to do that,
Check our sections in the light of the other sections.
Yes, so reading it all, updating them as necessary, trying to, I mean, you've already started doing a bit of work on that. Other sections are a bit further behind. And thinking about references, but thinking about it as a whole, but working on our individual sections, with the aim, I suppose, that after next Friday, we might really be in a position to paste something together that could be sent to other groups as a starting point for where modelling paper is going to be.
That's great. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
See you,
all right. Thank you.
Have a nice weekend.
I'm gonna stop recording now if I can find the right button at least. There we go. So that's